Good morning. This morning we are going to discuss quadratic equation. Quadratic equation. Quadratic equation. First of all, how are you going to understand what we mean by quadratic equation? How are you going to understand what we mean by quadratic equation? When we say quadratic equation is a mathematical equation which must meet two conditions. It must meet two conditions. So if these two conditions are met in a single equation, we said it's a quadratic equation. What are these two conditions? These two conditions. Number one, the power or the highest power of the unknown, power of the unknown, of the unknown, or the variable of the unknown, sorry, of the unknown, highest power of the unknown must be greater than must be greater than 1, must be greater than 1, greater than 1. That is the first condition an equation must meet before we can refer to it as a quadratic equation. What is the second condition? The second condition is the powers of the unknown in the power of the unknown, sorry, power of the unknown in the terms must be different, must be different. That is, it must be varied. Hmm? The power of the unknown must be varied. Let's take for example, let's see the general formula of a quadratic equation. We have a x squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Let's look at this equation. If you look at this equation closely, you will see that it meets these two conditions that we stated above. We said the first condition is that the highest power of the unknown must be what? Greater than 1. If you look at this equation very well, you see that the a here, b, and c, they are constant. So the unknown we have here is x in the variables. Is the only variable we have here, which is x. The power here in these terms is 2. The power here in this term is 2. The power here in this term is 1. And the power here in this term is 0. Because this c can also be written as cx raised to power 0. Therefore, you will see that the power in the terms, the power of the unknown in all the terms are different. The first term here, which is ax squared, the power is 2. The second term here, which is bx, the power is 1. And the last term here, which is c, the power is 0. You can see the powers are different. That is first condition. Second condition is that the highest power of the unknown must be greater than 1. If you look at the unknown here, the highest power it has is 2. The highest power it has is 2. Therefore, the highest power here is greater than 1. Therefore, these two conditions are met. So when you see equation like this, we said it is what? It's a quadratic equation. So that is how you are going to identify a quadratic equation. Either you are given directly as a question, or you are working in a mathematical question and you get something like this nature. You know that you are dealing with what? A quadratic equation. Now, when we talk about quadratic equation, what will be required of you is you will be asked to find the root of the equation. The root, the roots of the equation. The root of the equation of a quadratic equation. The root of the equations. When we say the root of the equation, we are referring to the value or values of what? Of the unknown you have there. For example, let's say now root of the equation. Let's look at this equation very well. If you have 3x squared plus 5x plus 6 is equal to 0. If you look at this equation very well, you will see that it meets the condition to be regarded as a what? As a quadratic equation. Therefore, this equation is a quadratic equation. So when you're now required to find the root of the equations, what that one simply means is that you have to find the value or values of what? Of the unknown that present, which is x in this case. You have to find the values. So the values you get for x, in this case, which can be x is equal to this or this, is what we call the root of the equation. The value you get for the unknown is what we call the roots of the equation. And when we're now talking about the root of the equation, the number of values you are going to get for the root of the equation depend on what? On the highest power of the what? Of your unknown. So in this case, the highest power of our unknown is 2. Therefore, we are going to get 2 values for x, which is going to be the root of the equation. If the highest power of x we have here is 3, that means we are going to get 3 what? 3 values for the equation, which will be the root of the equation, and so on and so and like that. If you have the highest power of the unknown to be 4, that means you must get 4 values. So what we mean by root of the equation is what? The values of the unknown in the equation. So how do you determine the root of the equation? How do you get the value for the equation, the value of the unknown in the equation? So there are various methods. There are various methods. Method of solving quadratic equation. Quadratic equations. Method of solving quadratic equation. Method of solving quadratic equation. Method of solving quadratic equation. Methods, because we have more than one. Call it method of solving quadratic equation. Don't forget, if you have to solve quadratic equation, what you want to do is that you want to find the roots of that equation. I'm not communicating. So I'm not saying that there are various methods by which you can use to solve a quadratic equation. We have one. The number one method is what we call factorization method. We call it what? Factorization method. Are we? We call it factorization method. The second method is completing the square method. completing the square method. Completing the square method. The third method is the use of what? Quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. And the fourth method is what? The use of what? Graphical method. Graph. The use of graph. Graphical method. So these are the four methods you can use to determine the roots of a quadratic equation. These are the four methods you can use to determine the values of the unknown in your quadratic equation. So we are going to take this equation, this method one by one and see how we can do what? We can uh, use any one of them to solve any quadratic equation. But don't forget, if the examiner asks you to use any method, so that means you must ensure you use that particular method stated by the examiner. Or if the examiner do not state any particular method, you can go ahead or you are at liberty to select any method of your choice. That is why it is very, very important for you to know how to use all these four methods. So in the next class, we are going to take this method one by one and see how we can use it to solve any given quadratic equation. But before we end this class, let's quickly go back to what we have said so far. We said that quadratic equations, an equation will be regarded as a quadratic equation if it meets two conditions. What are these conditions? One, the highest power of the unknown must be greater than 1. Two, the powers of the unknowns in the terms must be what? Different. They must have different powers in different terms. So look at this, we have as squared bs plus c. So it's equal to 0. So that means the power of x which is unknown here are different. And also the highest power of the unknown here is greater than 1. Then we made mention of what we mean by root of the equations. We said the root of the equations simply mean the values you get for the unknown. The value you get for the unknowns. So in this case, and the number of value you are going to get for the unknown depend on what? The highest power of the unknown. So in this case, where you have the highest power to be 2, the value you must get for x must be 2 values. Where the highest power of x or the unknown is 3, the value you must get must be 3, and so on like that. And in this class, we're going to limit our discussion to a quadratic equation whose power is 2. Highest power is 2. Then later we'll discuss the various method by which you can solve quadratic equation, where we said there are 4 methods to solve quadratic equation. 1, factorization method. 2, completing the square method. 3, quadratic formula method. And then our 4th method is graphical method. So in the next class, we're going to take this method one after the other and see how we can use it to solve any given quadratic equation. So thank you for watching.